Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Sue Barrett, and I'm the president of the Metropolitan Planning Council, which for more than 85 years has been working to build a better, bolder, more equitable future for everyone in metropolitan Chicago and beyond. We are very fortunate to have an engaged audience today for a really important conversation. As a planning and policy change organization, we worked on the intersectional issues of sustainability, equity, and prosperity. And we're very fortunate to have many partners, including the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. We believe in the power of collective action, and apparently so do hundreds of you. So thank you for joining us. This power of working together is how systemic change happens, and that is exactly what we need to achieve on climate. MPC works actively on components of that every day with the Mayor's Caucus and others, whether that be stormwater solutions or transportation alternatives. And we're very fortunate to have the leadership of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus on climate responses. Here's what to expect today. First, we'll welcome a series of distinguished speakers who will comment on various dimensions related to our region's first ever climate action plan. Next, we'll hear a brief presentation from the authors about the plan, and then we'll have a panel conversation. When you registered, we asked you to submit some questions, which we'll use to kick off the conversation. And then you'll have an opportunity throughout the presentations at any point to use the Q&A function on Zoom to submit your questions. So I encourage you to do that. As I cap my 25 years as MPC's president, I'm reflective on all the things we have achieved together with partners and all of the tough work ahead. And that's why I'm so energized and looking forward to this conversation today. And no one better to lead us through that conversation than Geneva Mayor Kevin Burns. Kevin has been a local, regional, and international leader on climate response. So we're just delighted. He's the perfect person to lead this conversation as an environmental champion. He has played a leadership role along with many of his allies and colleagues in developing the climate action plan for the Chicago region, a first. And he chairs the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Environment Committee and its Energy Subcommittee. Thank you so much, Mayor Burns. I'm delighted to have you as an ally and partner and look forward to this conversation very much.
Thank you, Mary Sue, very much for those kind words. And good afternoon and welcome to all of you for the official launch of the 2021 Climate Action Plan for the Chicago region. I'm proud to be your host and moderator for the next 90 minutes and honored to introduce you to local, regional, national, and international leaders in climate action, with the focus, of course, on the common denominator of building strong and coordinated municipal leadership. I have called my community of Geneva, Illinois home for 47 years. And I began my 21st year as mayor only 6 weeks ago. While serving as the chairman of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Environment Committee and Energy Subcommittee, I have been reminded time and time again that the alchemy of creating substantive, equitable, and sustainable change requires harnessing the enthusiasm, the passion, purpose, and potential of hundreds of communities simultaneously. The Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus is a regional council of governments which unites leaders from 275 municipalities to work towards common goals of improving the quality of life for millions of people in our region. To join forces for a more sustainable region, we created a set of sustainability goals and proposed sensible strategies for achieving those goals. Over the past 5 years, 132 municipalities and 4 counties have joined us in formally supporting these goals of the Greenest Region Compact, otherwise known as GRC. Together, we form the largest regional sustainability collaborative for municipalities in the United States. The Greenest Region Compact grows from our earnest commitment to take action on the most urgent threat facing our region, our nation, and the planet, the climate crisis. But the GRC is not a climate plan. As the role of municipalities in leading climate action became more essential in the years following the removal of the United States from the Paris Accord, we began asking ourselves the following questions. How can any one municipality turn passion and political will into effective climate action? And how can our diverse communities come together to address climate change as a region? We wanted to create a municipally focused climate action plan to guide all of our member municipalities and work together to have an impact as a region. We had the good fortune to earn the confidence of the European Union, which has fostered regional collaboration for climate around the globe. And 2 years ago, they chose to mentor us as one of 4 US metropolitan regions to demonstrate regional climate planning in America. Pioneering a climate action plan, as you can imagine, is an enormous undertaking. To complete this plan, we have leaned on the extraordinary talent and knowledge of so many partners and allies. I will be introducing many of those valuable partners who are joining us for this event. Our plan was crafted with assistance from 50 contributors, advisors, and reviewers. And while we cannot mention every organization who contributed to this event today, each and every group is recognized in the Climate Action Plan. Without the assistance of the following organizations, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency of Planning, Bureau Happel, University of Illinois, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, Argonne National Laboratories, the National Environmental Modeling and Analysis Center, CollaborLink Technologies, Fernleaf, Commonwealth Edison, and the Greenest Region Corps, this plan that we present to you today would not be possible. I especially thank the Metropolitan Planning Council for hosting this launch event today. And of course, the Climate Action Plan was crafted with extraordinary stakeholder participation during the last challenging year. 175 organizations contributed to this plan. Most participated in workshops, both in person and online. Of these organizations, 53 are municipalities who shared their expertise. Our team studied 52 sustainability and climate action plans from Europe, the United States, and of course, our own backyard to develop the recommendations within the plan. Today, we are beyond thrilled. I am beyond thrilled to welcome more than 860 participants to this event. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Climate Action Plan for the Chicago Region launch event a number of exceptional climate leaders who have not just played a role in creating this plan, but have also pledged their continued partnership throughout the plan's implementation. It's now my honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce you to the 56th Mayor of the City of Chicago, a staunch advocate for regional collaboration, which I can attest to personally, my friend, the Honorable Lori Lightfoot, Mayor of Chicago.
Thank you, Mayor Burns, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here. Let me recognize the other leaders that are with us here today, which I think really truly reflects the importance of regional collaboration. U.S. Department of Commerce Deputy Secretary Don Graves, thank you for being with us. Illinois Congressman Bill Foster. Bill has been a total champion and such an incredible advocate for our region and Congress. Bill, thank you for being here. I believe that also Representative Sean Caston is also with us here today. Thank you, Sean, for joining us. You've heard from Geneva Mayor Kevin Byrne, and Kevin, thank you so much for your incredible leadership and advocacy on these important issues. Metropolitan Planning Council President Mary Sue Barrett. Mary Sue, thank you for your 25 years of leadership on MPC. Advisor on energy transition to the European Commission, Elio. And I also wanted to give a special shout out to my friends at the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and including Director of Environmental Initiatives, Edith Macra. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're here to celebrate the release of the 2021 Climate Action Plan for the Chicago region, one of the first regional climate plans in the United States. This is a very proud moment for all of us. Our guiding light as we pursue comprehensive approaches to addressing the impact of climate change on our communities. The Chicagoland region, which is one of the 4 global regions to be selected for this planning effort, is uniquely situated when it comes to creating and implementing climate change strategies. Right now in Illinois, we have this vitally important political moment. We are in alignment at every level of government and with community and environmental stakeholders to act rapidly to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and accelerate a transition to a clean and renewable energy economy. This is a seminal moment for us, and we dare not waste this opportunity. We must act. Making this transition a reality will undoubtedly be and require an all hands on deck effort that requires investment at the federal level, the passage of state legislation that furthers Illinois climate commitments, regional coordination from local counties and mayors. Cities like Chicago need to lead by example, and a strong commitment to working in partnership with other important stakeholders. And most importantly, a laser-like focus on protecting our communities on the front lines of a climate crisis. We are all painfully aware our communities of color are the first to be impacted by climate change and are more likely to bear the brunt of its negative effects. As mayor of a city that is predominantly people of color, I have pledged not to stand idly by as climate change threatens to upend our lives and the well-being of our residents. That's why earlier this year on Earth Day, I announced Chicago's Green Recovery Agenda to further our climate goals and accelerate our transition to 100% renewable energy and to update our own climate goals by the end of this year. And why I want to continue taking opportunities like this one to join other leaders and work together to transition away from fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy, rapidly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and drive innovation approaches to climate adaptation. Setting and implementing such bold and equitable climate goals are necessary at every level of government, especially what we have heard and continue to hear from our climate experts and the International Panel on Climate Change. This increase in the Earth's temperature will lead to widespread and possibly irrevocable disaster unless immediate action is taken. We don't have any more time to contemplate or to argue. The effects of climate change are real, they are present, and we must act now decisively to mitigate against them. And here in our region, we've identified a number of climate stressors that can worsen these devastating effects. For example, last year, we saw record-breaking rises in lake levels, and we'll continue to see above average levels this year, which contributes to flooding and the erosion of our important shoreline. Extreme heat continues to be the leading cause of weather-related death in the US and in Chicago. And we expect to see more frequent and severe heat waves. And we're seeing this played out in the northwest part of our country already. And we know that every year our climate is warming and we're feeling those effects here in the Chicagoland area. And this year alone, we saw almost 10% more precipitation and predict even more coming as a part of unusually extreme weather events. I just talked with somebody yesterday who's a mayor down in Florida. Their hurricane season is now starting at least a month earlier than historic trends. So the evidence of climate change is real. And last summer here, we experienced 12 days of poor air quality, which is the worst we've seen in more than a decade. The Climate Action Plan for the Chicago region, however, has provided guidance and highlighted strategic priorities for local municipalities and stakeholders to focus when addressing climate stressors, such as the ones that I've noted. In addition, it's also urged us to think critically about how we protect our communities from climate change. As the past 16 months have made abundantly clear, we must pursue hyper-local strategies to drive resources into our communities that need the most support. That means coming together to invest in a local green economy, creating sustainable solutions for our region that prioritize the needs of our climate vulnerable areas and putting the well-being of our residents at the front and center of regional collaboration. Through this collaborative work, we will be able to keep our communities healthy while simultaneously providing residents with clean, good-paying jobs and further ensure that our recovery from this pandemic is both equitable and healthy. I want to thank our federal and state partners, as well as the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for developing the climate action plan for our region. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I really urge you to do so. It's a great document full of very practical advice, and we all need to embrace its recommendations. I look forward to working even closer together with you to combat climate change and provide residents here in the Chicagoland area and across the country with the healthy and clean communities they deserve. I also just want to emphasize one last point that Mayor Burns emphasized. We do place a premium on regional collaboration here in the Chicagoland region, whether it's on fighting the effects of COVID, whether it's on working together on our economy, or as we're talking about today, working on important environmental issues such as climate change and environmental justice. We have a track record that we are all proud of across the region, and we need to build on that track record to tackle this latest challenge of climate change. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thanks for all who rolled up their sleeves to work on this very important plan and report. And I'm going to turn it back over to my friend, Mayor Kevin Burns of Geneva. Kevin, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lightfoot. And we appreciate very much your passion, and we look forward to working with you on the journey that we're setting today. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is Congressman Bill Foster, a scientist and businessman who represents the 11th Congressional District of Illinois. Congressman Foster is the only PhD physicist in Congress. And on a personal note, Congressman Foster, you may recall 4 years ago at a meeting at the Union League Club in Chicago, you were there to encourage us. You were there to mentor us, and you were there to celebrate what we are trying to achieve and are presenting today. So with that, sir, the floor is yours. Welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, and thank you, Kevin, for being my mayor. When I moved into this area, 40 or so years ago, it was almost 40 years ago, to raise my family, I initially lived in Geneva.
That's right.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Bill Foster. I represent the 11th Congressional District, which includes Aurora, Joliet, and Naperville, which are the second, third, and fourth largest cities in Illinois. And they're communities in which the challenges of environmental justice are often glaringly evident. It's an honor to be with all of you today for the launch of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Regional Climate Action Plan, which will continue our region's leadership on environmental and climate action at the community level. And I want to thank Mayor Burns for emceeing today's event, and all of the mayors and all the local leaders for being here as well. And of course, thanks to Mayor Lightfoot for participating today. Lori understands that this challenge must be met by the entire Chicagoland region. You know, one of my college roommates was a guy called William Cronin, who became well known as the author of a book called a book about Chicago called Nature's Metropolis. The book highlighted the role that nature played in making Chicago what it is, and it also reminds us of the role that nature will play in remaking and greening the Chicago metropolitan region's economy. You know, when I drive up the I-55 corridor along the Sanitation and Shipping Canal, the Des Plaines River going through Joliet to Morris, you know, I imagine what this area should look like and will look like when the hydrogen economy has replaced the refineries and the fossil fueled industry along that corridor. And so there's an important role not only in our bedroom communities, but also for our business community to make sure that Chicago leads in developing those technologies. It's one of the reasons I'd also like to thank Deputy Secretary Graves of the Department of Commerce, as well as NOAA Administrator Gardner for joining. Because the federal government has an important and necessary role in addressing the climate crisis. As the only PhD scientist in Congress, I always look at the facts when making policy decisions, and the facts on climate change are crystal clear. It is real, and it is due in large part to human activity. I've been in Congress long enough to know that we aren't really very good at confronting long-term problems, and this needs to change. We have failed to take climate action seriously for decades, just kicking the can down the road and letting future generations deal with the consequences. But now those consequences are here and they're visible to everyone. Just last week, the New York Times published an in-depth look at how climate change is affecting Lake Michigan, the most important natural resource for the Chicagoland area. So it's not just Miami and New Orleans that could end up underwater, but also communities here in the Midwest. If we fail to act, we will lose far more than dollars. We will endanger the communities that we love. I'm thankful that our neighbors across Chicagoland are taking these issues seriously, and more importantly, taking action. Partnering with local leaders is a critical tool to address this problem. And I'm also thankful that the new presidential administration has brought science back to the forefront of policymaking. And I have no doubt that they will be a critical ally for our localities over the next few years. In Congress, I will continue to be a voice for science-driven environmental and climate policy, and I'll continue to lead legislation that will help make a practical difference. I was very proud the last session of Congress when I introduced, alongside Congressman Sean Casten, who you will be hearing from later, we introduced something called the BEST Act, which passed Congress and was signed into law late last year. The BEST Act tackles one of the most important problems that is preventing us from building a more sustainable energy grid, and that is the storage of energy when you have intermittent renewable resources. But through investments in research at places like Argonne National Lab right here in Illinois and the 11th District, we can foster technological breakthroughs that will allow us to sustainably store green energy. This will allow affordable greener energy to be used not just here, but in countries around the globe that are looking for the United States for technological leadership. We have a lot of work left to do, and I'm optimistic about the progress we're making at the federal level, and optimistic that we can increase the scope of that with really historic levels of investment in greening our economy. It's one of our most important duties as your representatives in Congress to connect the Chicagoland area to the funding opportunities, the grant opportunities, the model program opportunities that are going to be made available to stimulate the greening of our economy nationwide. And the launch of your regional climate plan is the next chapter in that effort. The Climate Action Plan is going to help mitigate climate change by pursuing net zero greenhouse gas emissions, as well as adapting to climate change in a persistent and equitable fashion. So thank you all for your leadership on these important issues.
Thank you, Congressman Foster. It's always a pleasure to hear you, and of course, a pleasure to see you. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is Eero Ailio. He is the Advisor of Energy Transition and Local Governance at the European Commission. Eero is the Commission representative for the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Mr. Ailio has been our mentor and our connection to international regions that are leading in the regional climate planning and collaboration. Through our time together, he's become a good friend of this organization, a good friend of this region, and we're delighted to have him with us today. Eero, all yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor Burns. Thank you, Congressman, Mayor of Chicago, and all the distinguished speakers, and then, of course, the audience for having me here. I come to the work of the cities since, well, I've been working with that topic for a while now, and grown this type of a conviction that there are a couple of things. Let's say there are three things that we need to drive home this energy transition. That is the key for the climate change fight. And those are basically the central government, they are the investors, and the third, the cities. And it's pretty clear what we need central governments for, and I think the Paris Agreement is a good example of that. So we don't have to develop on that a lot, but and then if we go to investors, so we know that investors will get along, will get involved as long as there are profits to be made and reasonable projects. So the third thing is cities. Well, the role of cities is super important for the reasons of actually the people who live there, the citizens and the businessmen and business people, because these are the people who actually drive the whole move forward. So when the citizens as consumers start changing their habits, their expectations from the services or products, so then they can really make the whole this process turn around. So the companies to change their production methods and the financiers to go behind there and all that. So I believe that this is where the things start changing. So what we've done, and I've come now from the European Commission, so our logic has been to take a combination of the top-down lawmaking and the bottom-up activities, take the force of those two, and this way drive forward. And that combination has turned out to be really effective. So there we create the laws, but then at the end it's the cities who drive the whole thing ahead. And I've been wondering why that is the case. And I think that one reason for that is that cities actually have this kind of a healthy self-interest to get things going. And the mayors, like Mayor Burns, so have an interest in getting things done, in his community, get it done fast, and then also maybe, creating jobs, potentially some votes as well. These can be useful. So these are the things that show that cities want to move much faster ahead, and that we see also in the UN context. And that is why we set up the Covenant of Mayors 10 years ago, actually, as a tool of sort of involving voluntarily cities to commit to climate change targets, greenhouse gas emission targets, and then planning and implementing those plans to driving down those emissions, usually through energy solutions. And this little experiment started 10 years ago. We wanted to have 35 cities. We ended up having 9,500 cities into that in Europe alone. And a couple of years ago, we teamed up with Michael Bloomberg, and we developed we set up the Global Covenant of Mayors. And in that, we developed, extended the project to the Americans, to Asia, Africa, and worldwide, basically. And here, US is playing an extremely important role. And it was our great pleasure to have actually the Chicago region as one of the leaders, a group of 6 metropolitan regions in the US, which actually tested this methodology, this logic in the US context to see that, does it make any sense? Does it work? And it certainly did work. And this is where we had indeed this test of a couple of years project with great results. And I think today we are witnessing indeed one big step forward on that, when Chicago is taking yet another step ahead on this. And this was the kind of a project that started with your previous administration, when it wasn't always that simple for us to deal with the central government. So, but now things are a little bit different. And now we have this great dual level diplomacy, the one, the central government diplomacy and the city level diplomacy. And we want to work on that. We really want to have this connection across the Atlantic. And that's really promising. And I've been impressed by seeing all the results that indeed the Chicago region among the metropolitan regions has achieved. So now we have to look ahead, of course, in this process. And we have this COP26, the conference coming up in the autumn, this fall. And I think that's going to be the kind of a place where we need to sort of team up again, show force, and do that from the city's side. And I think this could be a great opportunity again to flag the work that you're doing in Chicago and what the cities in the US on the whole are doing, and then the bigger global covenant constituency. So I would hope that the global covenant initiative will grow in the US now, and it will need leaders. And I think we're talking to those leaders now in this event, and this is something important. And last point, we do not, I'm talking now about Europeans, so we take a look at this energy transition and climate change as a way to create business, create jobs. It's a growth strategy for us. We're talking about the European Green Deal, which drives all the policies we do. And I see that there we have a challenge, and we have an opportunity to drive that ahead. Now that the US is joining this policy again by joining the Paris Agreement, you have such a strong industrial base and the innovation base and all of that, that you will probably, let's see, you probably pass us, overtake us in this exercise. I hope not, of course, but I really look forward to working a lot together with you on developing these relations at city level, at business level, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alio. Great to see you, and thank you for joining us in the different time zone. We appreciate very much your accommodation.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to introduce to all of you the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Mr. Don Graves. Mr. Graves has decades of experience in the private sector, government, and nonprofit arena. Mr. Graves served as counselor to President Joe Biden during the 2020 presidential campaign, and he led key banks' sustainability work as executive vice president and head of corporate responsibility and community relations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Don Graves.
Well, hello, everyone. It is great to be here with you today, and thank you, Mayor Burns, for that kind introduction.
Thank you.
I want to also thank the Metropolitan Planning Council for organizing this important event, and also thank you, special thanks to all the other leaders on this call, including Mayor Lightfoot and Congressman Foster and Caston. Many apologies if my connection is a bit weak today. Even we at the Commerce Department are facing the same infrastructure challenges the rest of the country deal with on a daily basis. I want to congratulate Chicago for being one of the first major metropolitan regions in the nation to step up and deliver an action plan to address one of the most pressing challenges of our time, the climate crisis. Throughout my career, I've witnessed the impact that extreme weather can have on communities and our economy. For example, weeks after Hurricane Katrina hit, I traveled to Louisiana to help spur economic recovery and to support small businesses that were devastated by the storm. And in fact, Hurricane Floyd hit just days ahead of my wedding in 1999, disrupting the local economy and causing significant flooding and deaths throughout the mid-Atlantic regions. People associate 2020, last year, with the year we experienced the worst global pandemic in over a century. But last year, we also set a record on the climate change front. A total of 22 weather and climate events cost the United States over $96 billion. Communities across the country are feeling the impacts of climate change. Chicago residents, in particular, face a range of climate-related hazards from extreme heat to drought and floods. Tragically, these issues disproportionately affect low-income households and communities of color. That's why we're here today, because it's not enough to just talk about addressing climate change. We need a concrete plan of action to tackle it head on. The blueprint that the Chicago region has established is so important, not just because it benefits Chicago residents, but because it also establishes a critical benchmark to guide other regions across the United States as they develop their own climate risk action plans. I'm excited that the Department of Commerce and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, are well represented today. You'll hear from our newly confirmed NOAA Administrator, Dr. Spinrad, shortly. And our scientists are at the forefront of working with communities in the Chicago region and elsewhere to provide world-class data and innovative solutions to address the climate crisis. As you just heard Congressman Foster say a few minutes ago, science is the key, and the integrity of our science and data must be a top priority. Integrating and sharing data from across the public and private sectors is absolutely crucial. Apologies, I'm losing it. It's absolutely crucial. But it's also logistically challenging. It's incredibly important for building stronger and more resilient communities, particularly those most at risk from climate threats. Fortunately, we're seeing data sharing across the country. For example, this summer, our team at NOAA partnered with scientists, volunteers, and community coordinators to create an urban heat mapping campaign to give cities the information they need to protect people from extremely high temperatures, something that unfortunately too many communities are experiencing this year. And that's just one example of an incredible partnership that helps make climate risk data more accessible to local decision makers. They don't just help address climate change, they help strengthen our entire economy. Because by addressing climate change together, we help drive economic opportunities and innovation for everyone, like creating new jobs, expanding our commercial sector, manufacturing sustainable goods and services, and building climate resilient infrastructure. The Climate Action Plan put together by the Chicago region provides a terrific example of just how powerful and productive these partnerships can be. The Department of Commerce and NOAA stand ready to help develop similar plans in partnership with communities across the nation. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We look forward to working with you. And with that, I'll turn it back to Mayor Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Graves, very much. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a real pleasure to welcome this gentleman to our event today. Please say hello to Dr. Richard Spinrad, the Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere, and the 11th NOAA Administrator. In fact, Dr. Spinrad was just sworn in as NOAA Administrator on June 22nd of this year. As we've heard before, and I think it bears repeating, NOAA has been a key partner in our efforts leading up to today, and no doubt moving forward, as NOAA has contributed climate adaptation and stakeholder engagement expertise. NOAA has also generously co-authored and contributed graphics and expert design for this report that we present to you. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our new friend and new administrator, Dr. Richard Spinrad.
Thank you, Mayor Burns, and I really appreciate your emphasizing my newness in the job. This is a real treat for me to participate in this rollout as one of my first duties. Let me also thank all the mayors, the congressional representatives, the distinguished guests, and of course, the 547 concerned colleagues that we've got in the call here. I also, of course, want to thank the Metropolitan Planning Council for hosting this important event. I'm very pleased to be here representing NOAA today. NOAA has been a world leader in climate science and is the United States authoritative source for climate products and services, and has been for over 51 years. We deliver data and services that are applicable to the mission needs of federal agencies, states, tribes, communities, and businesses all across America, an approach that I characterize as mission agnostic. Our publicly accessible data provide Americans with daily, weekly, monthly weather forecasts, as well as decadal climate projections. NOAA data reveal the local climate-related impacts that this plan today addresses. Heat is the leading cause of weather-related deaths in the US. The Chicago region is warming faster than the globe as a whole. Deputy Secretary Graves mentioned NOAA's work on urban heat islands, which shows neighborhood by neighborhood differences in exposure, as well as disproportionate impacts on people of color. NOAA is committed to helping health departments and first responders use accurate observations, predictions, and climate projections to protect people. As Mayor Lightfoot indicated in her comments, in the Great Lakes region, the frequency and intensity of precipitation is changing faster than for the nation as a whole. These changes will lead to more common flooding and even drought. NOAA is committed to providing weather and climate data to improve stormwater and transportation infrastructure, to reduce the impacts of flooding in an equitable manner. Our National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, is going to continue to provide monitoring and guidance for responding to drought. I've got to point out that even though we're in the middle of the warmest summer on record in the United States, let's not lose sight of the extreme conditions the Chicago region faces during winter. As Great Lakes warm, they can fuel more intense lake effect snowstorms. NOAA's Weather Ready Nation keeps people prepared for extreme weather. Our climate services likewise help planners anticipate and respond to the impacts of severe weather and winter storms. Both impacts and adaptive capacity vary from one neighborhood to the next. NOAA provides products and services for equitable climate adaptation, not only in this region, but for the nation as a whole. Our climate science is the foundation for smart policy and decision-making in a changing world, but NOAA's science and data are not enough. It takes community and stakeholder engagement to act upon NOAA's data and services in a meaningful way, just as you all have done with the plan being released today. This plan can serve as a model for multi-jurisdictional regional collaboration on climate action. NOAA stands ready to facilitate the development of similar plans across the nation by using the Climate Resilience Toolkit to train decision makers in the steps to resilience, which can be applied across diverse communities. With increases proposed in the President's fiscal year 2022 budget, NOAA will work to scale up and accelerate equitable adaptation, bringing technical expertise and data to the nation as we've done since our inception. Through climate smart design and community engagement, we will build back better. Thank you, Mayor Burns. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spinrad. Again, welcome aboard and thank you for being with us. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's learn more about the Climate Action Plan for the Chicago region from its co-authors. Please welcome to the event Edith Macra, who is the Director of Environmental Initiatives for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. Edith has been a champion on this climate action plan from the beginning. She is also the author of the Greenest Region Compact and supports municipalities throughout the region in achieving their goals. Also joining Edith is Dr. Ned Gardner of NOAA's Climate Program Office. Dr. Gardner has been dedicated to helping our region lead on climate action. It's also worth noting that Dr. Gardner is an architect of the United States Climate Resilience Toolkit and currently serves as its engagement manager. Dr. Gardner led in designing our climate action plan that all of you are enjoying to make it compelling and of course understandable. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Gardner and Edith Macra.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Kevin. Ned and I will go through an overview of the plan and orient you to help you use the plan effectively. Greenhouse gas emissions have been building up in our atmosphere since the start of the Industrial Revolution. They can persist for decades or even hundreds of years. So while we begin immediately to halt and draw down greenhouse gas emissions through mitigation, we need to adapt to living with the impacts of climate disruption for a long time. Our plan empowers local leaders to manage the avoidable and avoid the unmanageable. Climate action must be rooted in equity with the well-being of people at its center. This plan is based on an understanding of the challenges we face as a region, like sources of greenhouse gas emissions shown in this pie chart, or climate-related hazards Ned will talk about. These same challenges affect the whole region, although not necessarily in the same way. The strategies for addressing these regional challenges are tailored to leverage the strengths of municipalities. Municipalities can lead by example, encourage others to take actions, and enact policies that address climate change. The plan proposes local solutions to this global problem. Leveraging this economy of scale this plan can help municipalities skip ahead to choose meaningful actions appropriate for the community with confidence that they will have regional impact. Our region reduced emissions by 7% between 2010 and 2015. We need to triple or even quadruple this rate of change in order to reach our targets. We need to kick into high gear now. Starting from our most recent greenhouse gas inventory in 2015, we used modeling to calculate emissions reductions for target years 2030, 2040, and 2050. These colored wedges show that emissions must be abated in every sector of our economy, especially in energy generation, energy used in buildings, and in transportation. With known technologies and available data, we know it is possible to reduce emissions 80% by the year 2050. However, the path to net zero requires innovation and new capacity. Net zero, which means we add no new emissions to the atmosphere, is our goal. Our targets show a path to cutting emissions in half by the year 2030, on our way to reducing emissions 80% by 2050. This is all from our base year of 2005. Our plan includes 8 mitigation objectives to reach these targets. Demonstrate leadership to reduce emissions, decarbonize energy sources, optimize building energy, implement clean energy policies, decarbonize transportation by eliminating internal combustion engines, reduce vehicle miles traveled, manage water and waste sustainably, sustain ecosystems to sequester carbon. To demonstrate how this plan works, I'll focus on the objective, reduce vehicle miles traveled. In plain speak, that means driving less, using transit more, and active transportation more. Let's take a look at a sample of the strategies from our plan. Municipalities can enact zoning codes and make transit more accessible to more people and businesses. They can lead by creating safe paths and infrastructure for walking and biking, and they can encourage others to do so as well. Municipalities can encourage walking, biking, and transit use through education, incentives, and collaboration. The plan also rates each strategy for relative cost and effort, and we describe how each strategy can lead to equitable outcomes for vulnerable residents, as well as how that strategy relates to a more resilient future. When we mitigate emissions, new technologies and nature-based solutions also contribute to thriving, resilient communities. Mitigation and adaptation actions are interrelated and interdependent.
To mitigate emissions, we're tracing greenhouse gases from their source all the way to solution. And that's one variable. Building resilience and adaptation, we have to understand hazards and the way that climate amplifies them. And we have to understand how hazards affect people, places, and things that we value. So those are a lot of variables. Consider one example. We all have to get from home to work. If a flood takes out a road or cuts off access to fuel, critical services will be disrupted. One hazard can affect many assets, people, and economic impacts. Building resilience means improving everyday capacity, for example, by accommodating stormwater and designing transportation systems that can function after heavy rains. The resilience portions of this plan emphasize climate smart policy and building back better, creating equitable opportunity and benefits in the process. Using the steps to resilience, we inventory the plethora of things that we care about and the ways that climate can exacerbate a multitude of hazards. We recommend this assessment process be repeated town by town, but to help address high priority impacts, the plan does provide adaptation strategies linked to common ways that flooding, excessive heat, and drought can impact quality of life in the region. The goal of this plan is for each community to persistently, equitably increase resilience to emerging climate-related hazards. That's an iterative long-term process. Planning for climate change and making the necessary changes to prepare people and protect homes, transportation systems, and utilities requires coordination, as all the speakers today have emphasized at all levels of our society. The adaptation targets in the plan are climate resilience governance by 2030, using the decisions and strategies emphasized in the plan. Our target for 2040 is to build resilience across jurisdictions, leveraging federal and state support. By 2050, the Chicago region could be home to cohesive and resilient communities. Hundreds of regional experts categorize the strategies in this plan, yielding 5 overarching objectives that are widely accepted in adaptation science and practice. Engage and educate, incorporate equity and inclusion, collaborate and build capacity, enact plans and policies, and adapt operations and investments. For each objective, we highlight municipal strategies linked to the criteria that Edith already described, including roles, lead, encourage, and act, costs, and the anticipated effort required to enact each strategy. Our research and engagements in preparing for this plan focused attention on issues of concern across the region, but each municipality can address its own climate-related risk using the steps to resilience. The heart of this framework is engagement and iteration, denoted by the gears in the center of this schematic, representing all the steps. Engaging people at all stages is essential for incorporating equity into building municipal level capacity toward our goal of persistent, equitable adaptation. That challenge of sustained, inclusive engagement extends to every level of government. Planning organizations and councils of government can support municipal decisions. We can move to the next slide. State governments can support those regional entities, and the federal apparatus can support state government. When all these levels are aligned, sustained adaptation can be achieved. Climate is a crisis today because it's been so long in coming and people have been so slow to respond. The emissions of today will be magnified as huge problems tomorrow. As Edith has said, we have to kick into high gear now. The purpose of this collaborative regional plan is to accelerate climate action at a scale and speed that no one municipality could do alone. The lineup of speakers here today demonstrates the kind of coordination we need to cultivate. The attendees of this rollout event are well positioned to help municipal leaders immediately take actions to reduce emissions and build resilience. Back to you, Mayor Burns.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner, and thank you, Edith Macra. Ladies and gentlemen, we've assembled a pretty impressive panel to help us further understand the Climate Action Plan today and how it will be used to accelerate climate action at the municipal level for regional impact. I'm going to introduce each panelist one at a time, ask that panelist a question, and then we're going to review a series of questions submitted by all of you. Please welcome to the event, Alex Manila, Senior Planner at the City of Aurora, Illinois, in the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. Mr. Manila is an active member of the Environment Committee of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and he is the city's liaison to the Mayor's Sustainable Aurora Advisory Board. Alex, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Burns. Thank you all leaders for being here.
Thank you very much. I've got an easy yet broad question for you. How is the city of Aurora taking action on climate?
Well, thank you again for your question, Mayor Burns. So I would actually answer by using the word governance, whereas the word governance refers to a political will as political decision makers and decisions as well. But governance is more complicated. It is a more complex term that involves not only the political elites, management, but also the community and its representatives through advisory boards, commissions that help facilitate the implementation of a collective will. And as part of that political culture and political will, the city of Aurora is among the several cities and partners committed to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, the GCOM, also known. Also, the Cool DuPage initiative from a sub-regional level, and other entities like the Fox Valley Sustainability Network. Now, the city of Aurora has a long history of embracing sustainability. By example, in 2009, its first sustainability plan. In 2014, its first sustainability advisory board, the Mayor's Sustainable Aurora Advisory Board. Same board that in 2015 took on a very complex task, which was updating the sustainability plan. That sustainability plan was recently adopted using the greenest regions, the greenest region compact framework that offered the city of Aurora and its constituents concise strategies that could apply to Aurora as a whole. But Aurora didn't stop there, and through the Metropolitan Mayor Caucus and SoulSmart, the city of Aurora pursued the gold designation for as a community that enabled the residents and the business community to go solar and be more effective on a more practical standpoint of view. But not only that, we focused on mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation, pursuing and implementing policies for stormwater management and through capital improvement projects, setting aside funds for projects that could have taken care of flood issues and so forth. And also we engage the community. From an adaptation standpoint of view, instead, focusing on minimizing the negative effects that we currently, we all can see, we hosted several events, Greentown events, installed electric stations, conducted an urban adaptation assessment, and adopted or enhanced zoning regulations. But we do recognize that there is a limit for municipalities. Although Aurora is the second largest city in Illinois, we do recognize that, for example, greenhouse gas emission surveys or studies might be difficult. So that's the reason why this plan could help us as a city, as a community, and we city leaders as a whole to move ahead towards the direction and the goal that the plan sets forth.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next panelist is the Honorable Council Member Kim Stone from the beautiful city of Highland Park, Illinois. First elected in 2013, Council Member Stone is a very active member of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Environment Committee. Council Member Stone has over 20 years of environmental and management experience, and she co-chairs the Go Green Illinois, an organization that supports citizen environmental groups throughout the suburbs. A big shout out, Council Member Stone, to all your fans from Go Green who are joining us today. And the floor is yours, and I have this question. How is the city of Highland Park taking action on climate?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for mentioning Go Green Illinois. This is the first time in, I think, 7 years that we actually canceled our meeting and sent everybody here instead. So welcome to the Go Green Illinois people. I'm honored to be part of the Climate Action Plan launch today. The city of Highland Park is one of 6 Illinois municipalities that signed on to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, which has been mentioned before. And that document formalizes the city's commitment to strive towards measurable greenhouse gas reductions. So we've looked at sustainability in city operations. We've assessed emissions to make changes that are data-driven and that will have the biggest impact. And some of what the folks from NOAA were talking about before in terms of that data, that's been very helpful to us to have that data. We often have operational cost savings from some of these changes, and that offsets the higher upfront costs. So Highland Park has worked to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by setting a policy to reduce or to replace many city vehicles with hybrid or electric vehicles. We've retrofitted streetlights and lights within city properties to LEDs. We've placed city electric accounts on 100% renewable energy subscriptions, generating renewable energy credits. We've included energy efficiency in requests for proposals for building equipment, became a SoulSmart community with the help of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and we've subscribed municipal accounts to a community solar project supporting solar development in Illinois. So while Highland Park is focusing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions within its own boundaries, the need to address climate change far surpasses our municipal borders. And that's why this process and this climate action plan is really important. We've got to focus on the efforts that impact all of our communities on a regional level if we're going to make the difference we need to make in order to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So I will leave it at that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much,
Thank
Councilmember.
you.
Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Congressman Sean Casten, representative of the 6th Congressional District here in Illinois. Congressman Casten has been fighting climate change as a scientist, clean energy entrepreneur, and CEO before coming to the halls of Congress. Congressman Casten serves on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis and is co-chair of the New Democrat Coalition Climate Change Task Force. Welcome, Congressman Casten.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So, Congressman, if I may, what is your perspective on regional climate planning?
So number one, I cannot thank all of the mayors, you and others, for sticking with this, even when the federal government has been a little bit fickle. When when I was in Madrid with the delegation from the House, with our little pins that said we're still in, and feeling some degree of shame that the federal government had pulled out of the Paris Accord, it wasn't lost on anybody in the international community how many business and municipal leaders were there creating a footprint. That really, really matters. So thank you for sticking with this. I think the biggest focus that we've got federally as relates to you all is and however you want to call this, the transition risk and the physical risk, but there's different ways you can frame it. But essentially, we have one bucket of issues that affects you all because it is the physical risks of climate change. What happens as the flooding becomes more severe, as the heat waves get hotter, as the derechos become bigger and longer and wetter? And what does that mean as far as both the infrastructure we have to build for resiliency, but also what happens, these sort of hyper-local but globally massive financial impacts? I've been spending a lot of time in the Financial Services Committee working with Janet Yellen and others to go through and make sure that our financial regulators are going through to try to understand what happens when we make these shifts. Where is the exposure? There's a report I would encourage all of you to read that the CFTC put out a year and a half ago, managing financial risk, managing climate risk in the financial sector. And they pointed out, among other things, that like 25% of the commercial mortgage-backed securities market is concentrated in Houston, Miami, and New York. That's a really big deal, right? And they then went through and noted that the smaller the bank, the larger the portfolio of your asset base that's tied up in real estate. And so, as we think about where are the systemic risks, how do we, it's going to be a lot of small regional banks who are less sophisticated. And to put, not too fine a point on this, when we had all the CEOs of the big banks meeting with us a few weeks ago, I said to them, all right, so all of you who still are maintaining holdings in this space, are you changing the percent of your holding that's in senior debt, sub debt, equity? And they all said, no. And I said, okay, can I presume that once you see the risk coming, you are going to change your risk profile and dump these securities off on less sophisticated players? And I got a rather resounding yes. Well, that's local banks, right? And those are the lifeblood of your community. So those issues are on the physical risk that we need to think through. There is also the huge transition risk that is generally positive, but also has to be worked through, right? Anything we do to convert to a cleaner, lower carbon energy infrastructure is also a conversion to a lower cost energy infrastructure. If you got an electric vehicle, you don't have to pay for gasoline anymore. If you got solar panels on your roof, you don't have to pay for electricity anymore. If you invest in a more efficient windows, geothermal, et cetera, all these things lower your energy costs, because if you're not burning fossil fuels, you don't have to pay for fossil fuels, and that's pretty awesome. Getting that done is going to require building a lot of stuff. When I've talked with Jennifer Granholm, her estimate at the Department of Energy was that to electrify everything we need to electrify with clean energy will require that we build over 1,000 gigawatts of new generation in this country in the next 15 years. By the way, our total current generation fleet is about 1,000 gigawatts, and build over $350 billion of new wires to connect this new generation to new loads. That's a lot of stuff. And I will tell you that New York knows how to finance things. San Francisco knows how to digitize things. Chicago knows how to build things. this is going to be a big opportunity for the Chicago region, but it's going to be intimately tied with all the municipal level of how are we going to build these things, where the talent's going to come to build these things at our schools and our communities. How are we going to cite them? Who's going to have a say in the zoning process? How are we going to manage that? And it's easier to articulate that than to say exactly how it's going to work, but let's absolutely maintain a very open two-way conversation as we work through.
Fantastic. Congressman, always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much for your expertise, your insight, and your wonderful remarks. We appreciate them very much. And we look forward to working with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maya Duda. She is the first ever sustainability coordinator for the city of Waukegan, Illinois. Maya first started with the city of Waukegan in 2019 as an AmeriCorps volunteer through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus's Greenest Region Core program. Maya, welcome.
Thank you.
So Maya, here's your question. What are the challenges and opportunities for the city of Waukegan when taking climate action?
Great. Thank you for this excellent question, Mayor Burns, and thank you for having me. So yeah, I think as the sustainability coordinator of the city of Waukegan, my work is always reminding me of challenges and opportunities within climate action and how they're often sort of two sides of the same coin. So when we're facing a barrier, we might just have to rethink what climate action could look like for that community, for that particular community or context. So when I think about Waukegan, it's about 40 miles north of downtown Chicago. It's located on the beautiful shoreline of Lake Michigan. We have nearly 90,000 residents, but we're also a designated environmental justice community because of industry and minority population percentages. So, and income levels. So industry in Waukegan, past and present, has polluted our air, water, land, and has disproportionately affected the health of our community members and critical ecosystems. These are major challenges in the way of climate action, and it's unacceptable. So climate action should be directly improving the resident quality of life. And these all pose opportunities for the city to both acknowledge and work towards remediating our past and present, and act on climate in a way which increases community resilience. So we've already had opportunities come from these challenges that the city and residents have been working on. Our land and harbor has been continuing to be remediated for incoming sustainable development. We have a newly adopted sustainability plan based on the GRC. We now have a date for retiring the coal plant, making the just clean energy transition a reality, and so much more. And these have all been accomplished by years of work put in by community members, groups, and partners like Clean Power Lake County and Faith in Place, just to name a couple. And then also really dedicated city staff and elected officials that are working constantly to do this kind of work. So I'm really excited about this climate action plan for the Chicago region because it's an incredibly important tool for the city of Waukegan. It'll provide us scientifically and socially informed strategies on how to pursue effective climate action for the challenges that we have, especially on a municipal level. And it also establishes a great way for collaboration with our neighboring communities, as we also share very normal challenges like capacity issues, funding issues, technical knowledge. And so having that collaboration aspect is also great. So I'm really excited for the city to have this municipally focused tool and to continue working to change our challenges into opportunities with it.
Fantastic. Maya, thank you for your leadership, and please send to your mayor and council and all the community members who are with you our appreciation as well. Thank you. Folks, we have some questions for the panelists that all of you submitted when you registered for this event. So I'm going to rattle off some of these questions, then I'm going to ask the panelists to respond as best they can. I may, if no one objects, ask a couple panelists to address the same question. So here's the first question, folks. Net zero and equitable, resilient communities are ambitious goals. How will we get to the level of effort needed to enact this plan? I'm going to turn to my friend from the beautiful city of lights, Aurora, Illinois, Alex Manila. Alex, how do you answer?
I would say that probably a more comprehensive, interrelated approach among several communities would be beneficial for the community as a whole. It's not just one action, one fits all we all need to be on board. We all need to arrange for the next steps, further actions, and plan budget for what comes next.
Very good. Congressman Caston, if I may, I think the operative word here is level, or operative phrase, level of effort. That level, of course, would have to include our federal partners. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, without question. I think I'm struck sometimes that we can get a little bit bogged down in whether or not we have the ambition that is suitable to this moment. But I would point out that the only thing we're short on is ambition. We have the talent, we have the tools, we have the science, and it's hard to top up those things if you don't have them. So we will do it. I would just point out though that I will guarantee you, put dollars to donuts, this is going to be much easier than we think it's going to be. Which is not to say that it's going to be easy.
Right.
But it's going to be easier than we think, because one of my favorite axioms of political life is that losers always cry louder than winners cheer. People who know what they have to lose in a transition are really noisy about it because they know what the stakes are. People who know what they have to gain, in some cases, aren't at the table, future generations. In some cases, don't know that they're at the table. The entrepreneur who is waiting to see the opportunity emerge and is all of a sudden going to have that eureka moment. And indeed, if you look at our history, to sit there right now and say, can we decarbonize the world by 2050 at the latest? Boy, that sounds hard, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It is hard. On the other hand, if I told you that we could electrify all of rural America within 15 years, from no electricity to light bulbs in every home, that sounds pretty hard, and yet that's exactly what we did after the New Deal. If I told you that we could build 200,000 megawatts of combined cycle generation capacity, primarily with the private sector, in just 10 years, 20% of the entire power fleet, you might say that's impossible. You can't get the private sector to move that quickly in this space. Well, that's exactly what we did after we deregulated the power industry. And that power came through. If I told you that in 2012, not that long ago, a candidate for president would describe Tesla as a loser, and that company would now be, have what, 8 times the market cap of General Motors, that's crazy. We can't get it that wrong. And here we are, sort of transforming. So those changes will come, but in every case that I just mentioned, the beneficiaries of that transition were not at the table when the debate was happening about whether we'd start. And so the political challenge we have federally right now is that there's more losers than winners in the room, and they're making a lot of noise. But as we start winning, success is going to breed success, and we're going to go forward. So just push, and then as what was Winston Churchill's line, that you can always count on America to do the right thing once we've exhausted all the other options. The flip side of that is that if you always do the right thing, you'll look prescient.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Congressman. I'm going to drill down to the local level with this next question. This is a broad question, but I think it's obviously important. How can municipalities accelerate action? And I want to ask my friend, Councilmember Stone from Highland Park, to respond.
Thank you, Kevin. Municipalities can set attainable goals. We can put in place policies and practices to achieve those goals. It gets back to think globally, act locally. Highland Park has a 3-year sustainability plan that guides the city's environmental efforts within a short time frame to set forth an aggressive yet attainable work plan with timelines that keep the city from kicking the can down the road on climate action. Some of the examples of the sustainable practices that I mentioned before are ongoing. Our sustainable vehicle policy will result in the transition of our entire fleet to cleaner vehicles in the long term. Our bike walk plan will improve our infrastructure to make it easier for people to get around by foot and bicycle. We can update our building codes to make more efficient construction the norm, and we can reduce energy use and change zoning codes to allow renewable energy. It's really important to consider the data, to continue to assess that data, and to move the goals accordingly so that we can continue to improve our sustainability.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. this is a good question, and it's simple, yet I think powerful. And I'm going to ask Maya for your initial thoughts on this. What is the quote path end quote to resilient communities? And I'm going to ask Alex to also comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is a really good question, especially in the climate space now. I think the term resilient has become more relevant. And I don't know if we all are working towards the same thing. And I think it can mean a lot of different things. And so we talked a bit about it earlier, but resilient communities, if a community is resilient, it has the ability to respond to a disaster or adversity. This can come from strategies that are in the climate action plan. So it lists that there are different projections from the effects of climate change, such as flooding. And so there are specific strategies we can do, like invest in green infrastructure, that are really important tools that are going to help our communities be more resilient, especially through infrastructure. But I think one thing we also need to focus on is investing in our community culture a little bit more, and understanding that a capacity to care between community members can be really key during moments of natural disasters. And so making sure we're fostering municipal trust and also community trust, neighborhood trust. And that can come through advocacy, that can come from educational events, and just ways to make sure that the residents feel that they are independent and that they can count on one another as well as their municipality.
Wonderful, thank you. Alex, I'm gonna just amend this question slightly. What I hear from our friend Maya is that the path is wide, that we should not narrow our option. Would you agree with that? And if so, how wide is the path in Aurora?
Well, here's the thing. I think that two components, education and engagement, are key roles in setting the path and defining the path moving forward. Whereas the education process and the education and the engagement process is not only one way, is actually a 360 approach that goes each way of direction. It's both directions. So from the leaders to the community and vice versa. By communicating and by engaging all stakeholders at the same time, we can have a common sense, a common path to take on, and actions can be easily achieved where consensus is reached.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Okay, panelists, check out this next question. It's actually, check this out. It's actually about four words long. And I'm going to ask Congressman Caston to provide the first response.
He left.
Oh, good. Well, that makes it easier then. What the heck? I'm going to ask our friend, Councilmember Stone. The question is this: what gives you hope?
Kids, the involvement of kids. So I am often in meetings where I tell people, and some people who are in the audience have probably heard me say this, that this is my 32nd year working professionally on climate change. And there are a lot of people probably working on climate change who are younger than that. And I'm really glad that there are people younger than that, because maybe they will bring in some new and innovative ideas and we will move this forward, because I'm glad it's finally on the agenda, but 32 years is too long to be working on climate change. We should be way beyond where we are now. And I see hope in younger people getting involved.
Fantastic. Maya, would you agree?
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting thing you said about, the amount of time you've been working and you're kind of like, why am I still working in this? Because I was thinking about this question, and I was thinking about how I'm pretty early in my professional career in the climate space, and I want to keep being in it, but I'm really curious about what it's going to look like in 10 years. And I think the placement of my uncertainty is a little bit about, is what gives me hope, I would say. I think in my education and current job training climate space, I've noticed a really increased awareness of recognizing climate change as a social justice issue. And in that, I have a better understanding of, at its core, like, we who call Earth home are the ones that are most at risk of a changing climate, not the planet itself. And we also know that the risk is not the same for all of us. And so the Climate Action Plan, it's a response to the climate crisis, but that is inherently linked to the crises that all frontline or groups have been always developing strategies and traditions of resilience, to use the term again, towards out of necessity. And so we all want climate action for a livable future, and we won't get climate action and justice without continuing to fight for the other groups of people who have been fighting for their entire lives for these kinds of liberation. So racial justice, indigenous sovereignty, gender justice, and more. And so it's a little bit overwhelming, but my hope comes from me understanding that I'm working in the climate space right now, and I'm working specifically on sustainability, but there are so many people that are doing other kinds of advocacy work that is also contributing to the climate space. And as we continue to open up our understanding of what climate action looks like, I think we'll be seeing that we're making a lot of progress, and we can lift up a lot of voices that have been doing really impressive work that we can all learn from.
Fantastic. If no one objects, I'd like to invite my colleague and friend from the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, Edith Macra, to join me as a co-host, if you will, to address some of the live questions that have come in from the audience today. Edith, are you with us?
I am. And thank you, panelists. I am just thrilled with that discussion and really appreciative of your involvement. So many of you have been involved very deeply in this planning process. We've been working on this even from its inception to implementation. We've had some questions that were submitted by the registrants from other regions. And this is a bit of a tough question for us because we've just finished our region. But looking ahead, what did we learn in our process about working regionally, and how might we be able to share this with other regions? Particularly, we've had inquiries from Northwest Indiana and or through the Great Lakes. So Kevin, do you want to tackle that? And then
well, I'm interested to see what anyone else has to say, because it is a heck of a question. I don't want to.
We're just learning.
Yeah, I mean, the reality. Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Stone. Go ahead.
Can you just repeat that one more time?
Sure. So what have we learned in our regional process that might be informative to other regions that want to do this? So the question is, how transferable is our process or our plan?
I think it's very transferable. I've got to thank Edith, really you, because the way that you put it together, the format, the spreadsheet kind of format is really helpful and useful. I know in Highland Park, we've been able to just kind of go with the Greenest Region Compact to go through that spreadsheet, if you will, and it becomes sort of a to-do list. We go through it and figure out what we can do as a city, what we have control over. And I think that it's the same with the Climate Action Plan, where individual municipalities can go through this bigger list that you've developed for the region and figure out what they can do on a local basis. And I think other regions can similarly take the list and figure out, is the whole list for us? Or, maybe we're not on a lake, so we don't need this component, but there's other issues that we have in our region, and kind of cut and paste from there. And I know there was one community that was trying to use the Greenest Region Compact, and they were so excited to tell me that they put the whole thing into a spreadsheet. And I said, no, it's already in a spreadsheet. So, having those different formats that people can take and edit, make it just really adaptable to other areas as well.
Anybody else want to respond to that regional question? What can we share? If not, we have more. With just question, and I'll ask it and then see if anybody wants to respond to it. Otherwise, I'll assign it. So the question is about citizen engagement in planning. There are two components, actually a couple of components to that. So this to consolidate the questions, how can citizens be engaged in the planning? And I presume this will be at the rollout. So next step up for municipalities is to take this plan and work with it locally. But there were specific questions related to youth and faith-based organizations and people of color. So anybody want to address that? citizen engagement question?
If I may, so the city of Aurora has formed back in 2014 an advisory board composed by a very small group of sustainability-minded people, and based on the free will of residents and recommendations from staff and recommendations from the management, this board was brought to life. And this dedicated and passionate group of people was able to relate to staff, relate to issues, ongoing issues, and bring forward some recommendations that are meant to shape and change the world, meaning changing the way we think development, making more accountable developers for choices that can have an impact on every single one's daily life. So advisory groups can work their way out to make an impact and make recommendations, meaningful recommendations. So that is absolutely something that I'd like to stress.
Well said.
And if the audience has any more questions, keep it open for just another second here. Otherwise, I will, oh, this is a good one. Thank you for that. So what about, how would we address communities that are reluctant to engage in meaningful climate change solutions? Maybe for lack of understanding, lack of will, or it seems too hard. So how can we have, as Kevin said, we have 136 communities pledged to the Greenest Region Compact and working with us to implement this plan right away. But what about those reluctant communities? Anybody?
I'll take a stab at this. I think that there are a lot of things in here that save money, and municipalities always are trying to save money and trying to reduce the impact on taxpayers. So, you know, we purchased 4 hybrid vehicles for our police department recently, and they cost somewhere about, I think, $3,000 or so more than the equivalent internal combustion vehicle, but they save over $4,000 a year. So do the math. You know, you keep that car more than a year, you've saved money. I think that sort of accounting, you know, using the financing rather than looking at the environmental benefit, often will bring people on board. So different people come in different ways, and if climate change or the environment isn't their thing, I think the financial management and the fiscal responsibility is top of mind for all elected officials at all levels.
Thank you, Councilwoman Stone. And I think we should wrap and give it back to Kevin to close, but in your closing comments, I'm wondering if there are 2 questions, or the nature of 2 questions that came in here. One, what are some easy things that municipalities can do, if you want to think about that as you close, and then maybe reemphasize the power of working collaboratively in your closing comments. So thank you.
Thank you, Edith. And a special thanks to all our panelists, our collaborators, our friends at NOAA, the Metropolitan Planning Council, and of course, all of you for joining us this afternoon. As I'm certain you'll agree, we can and must get started immediately on the easy strategies within the plan, but we must not just stop there. We must also tackle the more challenging ones, and tackling those together, I think, will make a big difference. Mitigation options, as Edith kind of prepped me for. Biking and walking has grown in popularity since the pandemic. Developing appropriate zoning laws to not only advance, but to inspire such mobility. We can also talk about energy codes, adopting stretch energy codes, so that we are reducing the impact on our stationary built environment that, quite frankly, makes up a large percentage of the greenhouse gases in our region. Attacking such issues as the flooding, It's not just about building bigger sewers, but addressing those issues with respect to the natural flow of water and how our built environment perhaps is impacting that natural flow. And of course, as Congressman Caston talked about, impacting our largest assets, our homes. We can communicate with our constituents about flood risks, as I just indicated, and talks about ways to mitigate those risks moving forward. But we can't stop, as I said before, at the easy strategies. The scope of the climate crisis demands that we tackle the harder strategies and seek collaboration in every level of society. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to reiterate something I wrote for the opening of the Climate Action Plan. And if you have had a chance to look at that, I do think this bears repeating. The advancement and implementation of the Climate Action Plan is really where the real work gets done. And it's done so, I believe, with an unvarnished realization that our work will be years in the making. But regardless, we must begin and begin today. When all is said and done about our contributions in this life, I believe that the accolades and awards that might come our way are secondary, if not tertiary, to the most impressive recognition we can receive, and that is to be considered good ancestors. Therefore, I ask you to engage your civic leaders to join this endeavor and make the Climate Action Plan for the Chicago region a cornerstone in your community's decision-making. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am humbled by the turnout, and I look forward to seeing all of you throughout this journey to make the Chicago region a more sustainable, equitable, resilient place to live, learn, work, play, and raise a family. Thank you all.